Okay, I got the indication it's on.
There it is. We are live on YouTube. And we are looking for the candle.
Good morning. We thought Kathy was going to be here, but that's okay. I wish she could be here. People need to know that it's open. I hit the wrong button.
Two.
I've been here many times before.
Yeah. Second floor.
I'm deteriorating.
What do they say? If you don't remember it, forget it.
Okay, 11 a.m. If it were theater, they would say showtime, but this is church. So instead, we will do something sort of churchy, which is light a candle, especially in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, which maybe we are part of, maybe we're not. We go back and forth about that, which has the chalice. The chalice flame, the sacred one that burns without a name. And we light the candle to say, welcome to Community Church of Boston. My name is Dean Stevens. And last time I checked, they called me interim administrator, but I like music director and bottle washer better. We are here. I've been away for a week. I was in El Salvador. A lovely trip. I hope to maybe talk about it a little bit later on, but very little because we have a beautiful, beautiful program this morning. And I want to start by welcoming both all the folks joining us virtually on Zoom and on YouTube and physically here. Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. So glad you're here, and they're still trickling in. And if it's anything like community church normally is, they trickle in all the way through noon or so, and it's 11 a.m. Last time I checked, Eastern time. Daylight savings is gone, and we had an extra hour of sleep, so we're all non-sleep deprived. Is that right? Not for me, but Emma's Revolution is with us, and Sandy O, we are so glad to welcome you back here. We love your music, and we play the songs of Emma's Revolution with our own group, which is called Community Voices, very regularly and very often. So Sandy O, welcome.
Thank you so much. So I'm Sandy O of Emma's Revolution, and usually Pat is right here next to me. But unfortunately, she's not able to be here today, but she sends greetings to everyone, and also especially to Kathy. We're so honored to be on this program with Kathy Kelly, and we're so glad to be with our friend Dean Stevens and this wonderful community. I have a couple songs to share for you on video, so you'll get to hear Pat's voice, and a song that I will sing live for you. So let's get started with a video that's kind of the song, and why we wanted to bring it here today is that really we do have work to do here as people in this country. As it said in the announcement about this program, we live in relatively lavish, if not actually lavish, lives compared to what's going on in the world. But we need to wake up every morning and know that we have a part to play in creating the world that we want. So this song is a bit of inspiration for that, for those mornings when you don't feel like you have it. And you might just need to remember that we each do.
When I waken in the morning and I open my eyes, I remember to be grateful for the bright blue skies. And I wonder what I'm here for. Give me meaning, I pray, for the breath in this body I've been given today. And I listen to the wind as she whispers low, I am always here, you are not alone. Hold firmly to your power, your blood and bone. Water and a gale will wash away stone. Unsteady on my feet as I rise from my bed, I need a song to quiet all the noise in my head. Memories of heartache, unresolved from the past, I'm ready to release them from my soul at last. And I listen to the wind as she whispers low, I am always here, you are not alone. Hold firmly to your power, your blood and bone. Water and a gale will wash away stone. May my heart be strengthened, my purpose be clear. May I always remember the path that led here. Children of ancients, seeds of the soil, born of resistance, beauty and toil. And I listen to the wind as she whispers low, I am always here, you are not alone. Hold firmly to your power, your blood and bone. Water and a gale will wash away stone. Hold firmly to your power, your blood and bone. Water and a gale will wash away stone. Water and a gale will wash away stone. Water and a gale will wash away stone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandy. That's a beautiful song. I had not heard that before.
Yes, it's a relatively new one, Dean. I was hoping it was new to you.
It speaks to me, and we look forward to learning it. It reminds me of a new presenter at Community Church. Her name is Reverend Irene Monroe, and she has a wonderful podcast. And the name of the last podcast, the title of the last podcast was An Attitude of Gratitude.
Nice.
And that's what that song is about. And it's so easy to get totally lost in the struggle.
Mm.
And not realize that's what a gift life is right here, right now. I'm just thinking of the fact that in the last month, my wife and I have been in 3 just phenomenal places. The first was the Salmon River in Idaho, doing a raft trip. And the second was New York City, going to hear the play Hadestown, which was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in my life, Anais Mitchell's incredible masterpiece, which, by the way, is in Boston coming up in the next couple of weeks. There's a run of it at the Opera House. A little pricey tickets, but maybe if you go to the little kiosk here, you can get half price or something. I'm going to go. In fact, I'm going to try and usher and go several times. I'm just obsessed with that play. And the third place that I got to be was El Salvador, and I just came back from there. And you know, I go about every 6 months and have been for 30 years. October '91 was the first trip. The experience with refugees recently returned to their homes was something that grabbed me by the soul and has not let go 30 years later. And I've taken groups every 6 months for 30 years with a little break for 2 years when our son was born, and another little break for 2 years when this thing called COVID happened, and I had not been back, and it was just a joyful reunion with me and with another friend who had been gone for 8 years. So, and just the inspiration that we draw from the lives of farmers who grow their own food and till the soil is something just that leaves me with an attitude of gratitude. That's enough to say. Folks, welcome to Community Church, and we just so look forward to hearing from Kathy today. I want to run a few things by you. We have next week Joseph Irizarry, who is a man who spent a number of years in prison and who is now the director of the Massachusetts campaign to end life without parole. Joseph Irizarry. Music by violinist Rob Flax and by yours truly, a duo. Campaign to end life without parole. We're especially eager to hear from Joseph because several of us just 2 weeks ago went to the parole hearing of one of our members behind bars named Lee Underwood, and it's a sobering experience. Two of us, Alan Clements and I, got a chance to testify in support of Lee Underwood's parole. The parole board is a monstrous thing that needs to be abolished, and the fact that it takes a year for them to make a decision on a hearing is unconscionable and needs to change, and we'll hear a lot more about that next week with Joseph Irizarry. After that, we have Diana Jones, is a wonderful half Native American songwriter. Diana Jones will do a live concert here in the auditorium, not virtual, but live. She will be here with us on November 21st. The next week after that is Margaret Randall, Poetry and Questions, Cuba and Nicaragua. I don't know if you folks have heard of Margaret Randall, but we certainly remember her from the 80s when she spoke so clearly on Cuba and Nicaragua of that day. And the week after that, December 5th, and I will stop there, is Major Danny Searson, who is his topic is Beyond Afghanistan, Patriotic Dissent Against U.S. Militarism. Danny has written a pretty amazing book that is called, did I not bring Danny's book? No, I didn't bring Danny's book. It's that fat, and it's a history book, alternative history, kind of along the lines of people's history, just different ways to look at history, especially the history through the eyes of a major in the U.S. Army who taught at West Point, Major Danny Searson, December 5th. And all of these have wonderful music. That day, David Rovics. So join us at Community Church if you can. Just a little bit of reading this morning. The first one, I always love Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days. It's kind of like a lectionary, what they call in the Catholic Church. It's a reading for every day of the week, and I haven't even read today's reading. I'll just read it. It's very short, and it's called Dreams for November 7th. One night in 1619, when René Descartes was quite still young, he dreamed all night long. As he told it in the first dream, he was bent over, unable to straighten up, struggling to walk against a fierce wind that propelled him towards school and church. In the second dream, a bolt of lightning knocked him out of bed, and the room filled up with sparks that illuminated everything in sight. And in the third, he opened an encyclopedia, looking for a way to live his life. But those pages were missing. Just for fun, I want to read the one that I didn't get to read last Sunday. And I want to thank everybody who filled in while I was not here. Judith Woodruff and all the people who talked about books they had read during the summer, and also Community Voices, half of Community Voices, which is Jimmy Francis and Cindy Mapes, who sang for us that day. And I actually zoomed in from a tiny town in El Salvador, and it was amazing that we had enough cell phone connection to do that. But we're in the brave new world. So here's last week's, which I love. It's called The Grandparents of the Editorial Cartoon. In the year 1517, German monk Martin Luther nailed his challenge to the door of All Saints Church at Wittenberg Castle. Thanks to an invention called the printing press, those words did not just stay put. Luther's theses crossed streets and squares and entered the homes, taverns, and temples of Germany and beyond. The Protestant faith was being born. Luther attacked the Church of Rome's ostentation and extravagance, the blatant sale of tickets to paradise, the hypocritical chastity of priests, and more. His heresies spread not only word by word, also by image, which reached many more people, since few could read, but nearly all could see. The engravings that helped spread Luther's protest, works of Lucas Cranach, Hans Holbein, and other artists were not, shall we say, kind. The Pope appeared as a monstrous golden calf, or an ass with bosoms and a devil's tail, or an obese man covered in jewels falling headfirst into the flames of hell. Without intending to, these sharp instruments of religious propaganda paved the way for editorial cartoons of our day. Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days. Find out about Eduardo Galeano if you don't know about him. He's my favorite of all time. Besides Danny Searson, I want to share with you some other books that came in. I'll start with these two. It happens to be that they're my uncle and aunt. Ella Shohat, who is my aunt, she's about 15 years younger than me, but my uncle married her. She is an Iraqi Jew who lived in Israel in her childhood, but her family disillusioned with Israel's treatment of not a, what's the word, of Arab Jews, which she is. They all moved to New York, and Ella is a professor of cinema and and Middle East Studies at NYU, and her husband, my uncle, Robert Stam. They wrote both these books, one of them together and one just Ella, and it's a marvelous reflection on the Arab-Jewish experience. Iraqi Jews, Syrian Jews, Jordanian, from every Arab country. We forget that before 1948, there were, for thousands of years, Jews who thrived and lived and in every Arab country of the Middle East. And here's another one that my aunt gave me. We saw them when we were in New York. It's called "We Look Like the Enemy: The Hidden Story of Israelis Jews from Arab Lands." Finally, a little paragraph from somebody who spoke here, General Smedley Butler. "War is a racket." This book just came in, and it's basically a tract that Smedley Butler wrote right after World War I, which is when Community Church was born. We are celebrating our 101st anniversary. Our 100th should have been a big whoopee-do, but COVID kind of rained on our parade a little bit. So we still keep on celebrating our 101st. It's a little harder to say than 100th. But Smedley Butler spoke here during the 30s. "I am not a fool as to believe that war is a thing of the past. I know the people do not want war, but there is no use in saying we cannot be pushed into another war. Looking back, Woodrow Wilson was reelected president in 1916 on a platform that he had kept us out of war, and on the implied promise that he would keep us out of war. Yet 5 months later, he asked Congress to, I'm sorry, I have to do something. He asked Congress to declare war on Germany. In that 5-month interval, the people had not been asked whether they had changed their minds. The 4 million young men who put uniforms on and marched or sailed away were not asked whether they wanted to go forth to suffer and die. Then what caused our government to change its mind so suddenly? Money. Or as Magpie 2 weeks ago said, follow the money. An Allied commission, it may be recalled, came over shortly before the war declaration and called on the president. The president summoned a group of advisors. The head of the commission spoke. Stripped of its diplomatic language, this is what he told the president and his group. There is no use kidding ourselves any longer. The cause of the Allies is lost. We owe you, American bankers, American munitions makers, American manufacturers, American speculators, American exporters, that was a parentheses, $5 or $6 billion. If we lose, parentheses, and without the help of the United States, we must lose, end of parentheses, we, England, France, and Italy cannot pay back this money, and Germany won't. And I could go on, but I'd rather reintroduce Pat of Emma's Revolution for our offering before we hear from Kathy.
Thank you so much. I'm actually Sandy, but the good news is that I'll answer to either name. And you know, for this service, I was thinking about that we don't think enough about the kind of effect that our militarism has on the people in the countries that we are dropping bombs on or that we are using drones for. And we are going to hear from Kathy about that. And that kind of situation creates an untenable and unanswerable question. What do people do? Do they stay where they are and live under the drones and the bombs? Do they leave? What else can they do? And this song comes from the stories more of the people who chose to leave, which is just something we shouldn't have to be asking people to do. We shouldn't have to be asking people to leave their homelands. And the song is called Still Here. Ooh, but we're dead, she said, softly crying. No, we're not. I said, we're still here. Take a breath, I said, feel your heartbeat. Take my hand, my love, we're still here. All our family have been lost at sea, but we have made it through. It won't be easy to be refugees, but we will make it through. We're still here. We're still here. I'm with you, my dear. We're still here. We're still here. Ease your fear. But they're gone, she said, all my brothers and their children and their wives. Yes, it's true, I said, I can't change that, but we'll honor them with our lives. All our memories we will carry with each breath and each prayer. Their faces we will never see, still they're with us everywhere. We're still here. We're still here. I'm with you, my dear. We're still here. We're still here. Ease your fear. Ooh. 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 So we'll stay, she said, slowly breathing. Yes, we'll stay, I said, you and I. And we'll live, she said, slowly turning her face towards the open sky. All your hopes and dreams still live in me, as my dreams live in you. Our faith is deep, our hearts are strong, and we will make it through. We're still here. We're still here. I'm with you, my dear. We're still here. We're still here. Ease your fear. We're still here. We're still here. I'm with you, my dear. We're still here. We're still here. Ease your fear. I'm with you. Ooh.
Thank you, Sandy. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
It's just lovely. Spotlight. There we go. There we go. And I just want to, by way of introducing Kathy, show you all something that's on our wall that we hang proudly.
Mm-hmm.
It is embroidery by Kathy's friends in Afghanistan, if I'm not mistaken, and it's right there as you walk into the church. And thank you for that gift, Kathy. I'm a special fan of embroidery, as you can see on my shirt, and the newest one is on my hat. I've a new product that I sell along with coffee and crafts from El Salvador, and it's embroidered hats, and they're made by my friend Maribel in the town called El Higueral, and she made this one for me, and it says BDS, and I sort of assume that everybody knows that that means boycott, divest, and sanction. But you've never seen it embroidered on a hat before, I bet. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us, Kathy. She received our 2015 Sacco and Vanzetti Award for Social Justice here at Community Church. And I will read that Kathy Kelly is a peace activist and author whose efforts have at times led her to live inside of prisons and war zones. She is coordinating the Ban Killer Drones campaign. With her companion, she helped found and coordinate Voices in the Wilderness and Voices for Creative Nonviolence. As a guest of the Afghan Peace Volunteers, Kathy traveled to Afghanistan over 24 times from 2010 to 2019. Kathy, we're so glad to have you. Thank you. The floor is yours. Unmute.
Thank you very, very much, Dean, for organizing so many of the get-togethers for the Community Church of Boston and today's get-together. Sandy, that was a very, very compelling song, and your compassion and your care, it's so authentic, and it really is a perfect introduction for ideas that are on my mind very much today, and likewise reference to World War I. I didn't realize that this is your 101st anniversary, but happy anniversary to the Community Church of Boston. And thank you to everybody who has joined this morning. You know, Sandy's song indicated something I so strongly believe, and that is that I think stories are our number one way to make sense out of our realities. So I'd like to present 3 stories this morning. They happen to be true stories. They're all in relation to Afghanistan, and I hope they'll be of use in trying to make some sense out of the reality that we face, of an alarming reality in many ways regarding war and responsibility for our wars. So the first story comes to mind because winter is approaching. And winter in Kabul, winter in Bamyan, Afghanistan, is a very, very harsh time. Most people don't have money to buy wood to put inside of small wood-burning stoves and get warmth through that. And coal is a terrible pollutant. So many people at night are dependent on thick, heavy blankets. And also kind of they sleep in a heap trying to keep warm. Well, when I first went to Afghanistan, I started to adjust myself to some of those realities of winter. But one young friend, he's been a close friend to me for 10 years now, entrusted to me a story from his childhood. And he grew up in Bamyan, which is a rural province in Afghanistan. And the Taliban had killed his father, leaving his mother, a young widow, trying to care for him and his 5 brothers and sisters. But, she tried hard to find food and warmth for them, but there was never enough food, and there was certainly never enough warmth in the wintertime. And so he recalled one winter's night when one brother was sound asleep and the other brother awakened. And he thought, I suppose if his brother is sleeping, he won't notice. And he tried to snatch more of the blanket away so he could be warm. But the brother who had been covered by that blanket woke up and wanted to snatch the blanket back. Well, the 2 brothers began fighting over one blanket. And in their fear and their rage, the fight escalated. And it seemed like maybe one was going to even suffocate the other, fighting over this blanket, cold as they were. And the other family members woke up and they managed to tear these 2 brothers apart from each other. It's a hard memory to hold. And I want you to know that the young one who told me that story, along with one of his other brothers, over the span of the next 6 or 7 years in Kabul, every winter got together with others who were purely volunteers. They were never paid a dime. And they worked out a very interesting project in which stuffing, fleece, synthetic fleece, basically, was delivered to widows who lived up on the mountainsides where there was no water and they had to go long distances and haul water to their families, but at least the rent was lower. Widows who had a hard time feeding their children. And those widows certainly knew how to make the heavy blankets. So with the materials, they shoved the fleece into the coverlets, they sewed them up, they made these heavy blankets, and then my young friends, the volunteers, collected those blankets and distributed them in refugee camps where people had no warmth. It was a beautiful, beautiful project, and I would just like to briefly offer you a few images from that time. These are the widows who are bringing the blankets to be distributed. And then they would be stored in all kinds of different places. This is Arfed Khalida parceling out the fleece to the widows, and their children would help them carry it. And they would hire these very precarious lorries to deliver the blankets to refugee camps. And it all took a great deal of supervision and organization, supervised by our young friends. And they were proud of what they did. They knew they had done a good thing. Now, throughout that time, anywhere in Kabul, if you looked upward, you would see 4 blimps that were constantly gathering footage of the scene below. They were spy blimps, and drones were constantly crisscrossing the skies of Afghanistan, and miles of footage was collected. And drone analysts were employed to study that footage. And apparently they were supposed to be establishing facts about patterns of life in Afghanistan. But one thing they were doing also was establishing people they believed had to be assassinated because they were high value targets. They were somehow selected as people who were bad people, or people whose homes would have to be subjected to the horrible night raids, or people who would have to be imprisoned in black sites or places like Guantanamo. And these drones never, ever could have understood the harshness of cold winters or the difficulty of being tormented by hunger. And this was going on across Afghanistan. And now it's escalating even further because all of Afghanistan's assets are frozen and there's no money going into Afghanistan. And so people across the country are finding escalating rates of poverty and hunger and cold. And meanwhile, the United States has put $10 billion into making sure that the drones will be housed and the drones will be getting fuel and other kinds of attack aircraft. They'll be stationed in Kuwait, in Oman, in the United Arab Emirates, and in an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. And that's where United States resources are going, rather than in trying to make reparations to people in Afghanistan who suffered desperately all through our 20 years of warfare. Second story I want to tell happened during a time when there was a great deal of United States media coverage of Afghanistan, much more than the previous 20 years of war. And that was coverage of the US withdrawal of United States troops, and then a very chaotic evacuation of people who clamored to leave Afghanistan. Well, the story that I want to tell you is about the family of a man named Zamari Ahmadi. Zamari Ahmadi worked for a United States non-governmental organization. It was an organization that tried to deliver food to people that were hungry, but also to promote nutrition and get people eating better foods and growing foods that might be better for them. He worked for that organization and also was kind of distinguished in his working class neighborhood because he had a car. And I can tell you that in all my visits to Afghanistan, living in a working class neighborhood, I met one person who owned a car. So having a car was really kind of a big deal. The other big deal in Zamari Ahmadi's life was that because he worked for the United States organization, he managed to qualify for a visa for himself and family members, and also one of his cousins had worked with the US military and he had the visa. Their bags were packed. They were in the hallway. The next day, they were going to leave for the United States. This was August 29th. So Zamari's to-do list was quite big because he had to not only get himself to his office and take care of odds and ends, he had just distributed a boatload of food at a local soup kitchen area the previous day, but also his boss needed his computer, and then he had to drop other people off who were his co-workers, and then his family and his neighbors didn't have any clean water because people were constantly running out of sources for clean water. So he had to pick up canisters, big canisters, and very carefully place those in the back of his car and bring them back to the home. And there's one other thing about the Ahmadi family that was, to me, very touching. They were so excited about their father and him driving a car that when he would return to the home, a sort of family ritual was that everybody would gather outside, not only to welcome him, but he would let one of the older sons park the car. And so the kids would all come out. Zamari Ahmadi had no way to know that that entire day, his last day in Kabul, he was being tracked because the intel that drones had acquired was presuming that his boss's home was actually a safe house for what's called ISIS, the Islamic State, or the Islamic State in the Khorasan province. And that his car was being used not to pick up water canisters, but that people were very gingerly carrying weapons that were placed in the trunk of his car and were going to be used for an attack. And so for 8 hours, the drone followed the car everywhere it went. And the people that were part of this kill chain kept adding to their story that he's picking up weapons, that he's gone to the safe house, that he's now going to pick up someone else. And they would have to destroy the car. They'd have to destroy him because they wanted to prevent this attack that they were sure this car was part of planning. And so as he pulled into the driveway of his home, and the children came out to welcome him, and one of them actually appeared for 2 minutes on the screen. The orders were given, and a drone, a Predator drone, fired a Hellfire missile. And these Hellfire missiles, when they land on a car, they create 100 pounds of molten lead. And then, if anybody does survive, steel blades kind of pop out and form a sort of lawnmower action and chop, slice the remaining materials or bodies into pieces. And so Zamari Ahmadi and his children were killed. 10 members of the Ahmadi family were killed that day, 7 of them children, 3 little toddlers. So I'm going to ask you to join me in seeing the faces of these members of the Ahmadi family. This is Zamari Ahmadi. He was 43 years old. His oldest son, Zamir, was 20 years old. Samir's younger brother, Faisal, was 16 years old. Farzad was 10 years old. Benjamin, 6, and Arwin, 7, were the sons of Zamari's brother, Romal. And here are 3 young girls killed in the strike. Hayat, age 2, Samaya, age 3, Malika, age 3. Perhaps what was most unusual about the attack on the Ahmadi family is that there was coverage, that the international press wrote for many days in a row about what happened. But this kind of attack is actually routine, has been routine in Afghanistan, and it has been happening in other countries as well. But the United States government and Pentagon, about 3 days ago, concluded the Pentagon's own self-investigation, and they said nothing was done that was wrong. Nobody should be held responsible because General Sami Said, he's a lieutenant general in the Air Force and Inspector General, because you have to evaluate the context. The context he's referring to, General Sami Said, is this day when the United States was seeking revenge, but also seeking to prevent another attack. But I think we should agree, yes, you have to examine the context. But to do that really in an honest way, we need to look at a broader context. And for that, I want to tell a third story, and that's the story of Daniel Hale. Daniel Hale was an Air Force analyst, and he had worked for the Air Force and then subsequently for a military contracting company. And he saw again and again stories like the one we just looked at with the Ahmadi family. And he began to realize that he was complicit in choosing, in selecting targets and, promoting, quote, intelligence that kept on getting it wrong. And he saw a government document that traced a 5-month program called Operation Haymaker, which acknowledged that 90% of the people that had been killed by the drone attacks in that 5-month period, 90% of the time they got the wrong person. The person who was killed was innocent. So Daniel Hale did a very brave thing. He took that document and other documents, and he released the papers to Jeremy Scahill, a reporter for The Intercept. Jeremy wrote the story. It was called The Drone Papers. And then the federal government came and arrested Daniel Hale and said, you committed a crime. You stole those papers. Daniel Hale, as a whistleblower, has now been sentenced to 4 years in the very difficult Marion Penitentiary. But at his sentencing, Daniel Hale said, I stole paper because I could no longer steal the lives of innocent people. And so Daniel Hale acknowledged his responsibility. And we, of course, need to acknowledge our responsibility. Now, Armistice Day is this week. On the 11th of November in 1918, finally, the ghastly, hideous industrial slaughter of a young generation across Europe came to an end. And one of the most moving video footages of that day shows soldiers who had come from the front, from the trench warfare, who silently absorb the realization that there are no more explosions, that the war is over. They don't clap. They don't cheer. They just sank, exhausted, and leaned against their packs. There's so much to learn from the people who, surviving World War I, wanted to prevent another war, and so tried to create an Armistice Day that would actually celebrate the ending of all wars. So much to learn. I've learned a great deal from Vera Brittain. You know, when she was a young Oxford student, she and her lover, her fiance, and her brother were so enamored with the idea of going off to war, the patriotism, the glory, the responsibility, the duty to country. And so her brother, Edward, and her fiance, Roland, enlisted, and they became officers, and they marched off to the front. And she didn't want to miss out on the shared excitement and this, experience of their lifetime. And so she volunteered as a nurse. And all of them were totally transformed through their experiences of trench warfare and chemical weaponry at the front. At one point, in a tent hospital, as she's trying to give some kind of relief to a tortured soldier whose body is maimed and is covered with sores, her own hands are covered with blood, and she asks, "Will I ever laugh again?" And all of them, in their correspondence with one another, begin to defy anyone to ever talk about war as glorious. So they were transformed. She alone survived. Her fiancé, Roland, was killed. Her brother, Edward, was killed. Two of their closest friends were killed. And so lonely and heartbroken, she nevertheless teamed up with another nurse, and she went to Germany after World War I. And there she met people who were tormented by hunger and by cold. And she realized the common suffering amongst people and the need to band together and not allow the moneymakers and the war profiteers to manipulate them. So we have much to learn from people who declared Armistice Day, something to celebrate. But here in the United States, the United States negotiated a troop withdrawal. They didn't negotiate the peace in Afghanistan. There's been no time to slow down, to assess, to absorb, to recognize, to acknowledge the terrible war of choice we waged against Afghanistan. Instead, the war profiteers are hell-bent, trying to goad us into a new war, a war with China, a war that they say will require such sophisticated drone warfare, such sophisticated artificial intelligence, that we must now bankroll many new developments so that companies like Raytheon, which is still supplying Saudi Arabia with weaponry, companies that supply weaponry to terrible governments like Saudi Arabia, whose cruelty has inflicted so much suffering in Yemen. Those are the ones with the worthy governments that we should support, we're told. But we can't at all work with China, even though if we don't work with China in this time of pandemic, in this time of climate catastrophe, in this time of nuclear weapon escalation, if we don't work together, we're finished. We're doomed. And yet we're told that we must become enemies with China. We're told that we must build up our armaments. And now it's particularly alarming because the United States is saying that in this very sophisticated competition for artificial intelligence weaponry and drone weaponry with China, the only way the United States can ever really get the upper hand is to move toward a nuclear attack. And they're crossing the nuclear threshold in speaking in this way. Admiral Charles Richard, in May of this year, he heads the National Strategic Command, advised that United States preparations for an armed encounter with China be changed from the the possibility of recourse to nuclear weaponry, to embrace the probability of using a nuclear weapon. And Professor Richard Bach has also noted that the United States government may decide that it has to attack China using that upper hand of recourse to nuclear weapons while the United States still does have military superiority. So we are facing a very, very difficult time when we must learn from the wisdom of Vera Brittain, who turned to the Germans and said, we are all part of one another. We must learn from Smedley Butler, certainly, and from the people who drew us toward an Armistice Day, and from all of the veterans for peace across the United States who will properly celebrate Armistice Day this week. And also, Vera Brittain entitled her book, A Testament of Youth. We have a testament of youth going on in our country today, which is a beautiful testament, the Sunrise Movement, the BDS campaigns, the Black Lives Matter campaigns. So let us follow these young people and hear their wisdom. We can celebrate Greta Thunberg and all of the people who are clamoring for a sane, a rational response to climate catastrophe. So again, with thanks for the music that Emma's Revolution always brings us, with thanks to Sandy and to Pat, I want to close with lines from a kind of cryptic song from a cryptic songwriter, Leonard Cohen, in his song Anthem. He sang out, ring the bell that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So let us let that light so shine in our lives that we can find the light that says, I am here, you are here, we're still here, and we'll move on with an embrace that seeks warmth and seeks vision, and we'll never find that through drones, but through humans. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. This light is, this candle is for that family in Afghanistan. We grieve with them right here, right now. We at Community Church welcome every kind of contribution and support that you can give us, including financial contributions. You can do that through our website, which has a credit card and PayPal option. It's very simple, communitychurchofboston.org. If you would like to send checks to 565 Boylston Street, zip code 02116, that is also legal tender. We don't quite yet accept Bitcoin, as does the government of El Salvador. We're either ahead or behind them in that regard. Thank you so much, Kathy. Again, thanks to about 8 people who are gathered with us now, and they are going to get to enjoy the pupusas that Luis Guzman, our Salvadoran cook and janitor, has just brought us from East Boston, where they sell for $1 a piece, and they're the most delicious, satisfying breakfast, lunch, or dinner that you can imagine. And they are laid out for us when we're done with the Q&A. Also, if you come physically to the church, you can pick up one of these. This is a T-shirt that was put together by some of our members behind bars who are trying to put together a podcast or a blog of their writings that is called Justice Today. It used to be just a written printed page kind of a thing, but they're trying to get it so that it can be sent to someone who can put it online. Justice Today. And we have these t-shirts that are a fundraiser for their effort, and they're available here for whatever contribution you would like to make to these members behind bars. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today. Emma's Revolution, and we just can hardly wait till both Kathy and Sandy and Pat are able to join us live here at Community Church and do a concert in our beautiful auditorium. And it'll be maybe to celebrate our 102nd or 103rd anniversary. We had a whole concert series lined up for our 100th, and we had to postpone all of them. So Sandy, it's all yours to take us out before we have a Q&A with Kathy.
Thank you, Dean, and I certainly look forward to that, as does Pat. I want to echo what Dean was saying about contributing to this community. This is a courageous community that is willing to bring in extraordinary speakers who can bring us right to the front, as Kathy did. And I want to thank you, Kathy, so much for bringing those stories to our ears and our eyes and our hearts. So do contribute to a community like this that is willing to do that. You reminded me, Dean, that we have these scarves as well, and have had the opportunity to sing with the Afghan peace volunteers over the computer, of course, and to sing with them about the environmentalism that they were trying to take on, about and how the Kabul River was so completely polluted. So I don't know when we're going to get to sing with them again, and certainly perhaps not a mixed group of young men and young women anymore, but I hope that we will have that time. And I wanted to leave you with this song, or bring this song to you before we go into the Q&A. This song has actually been sung in Afghanistan and brought there by a military chaplain from a denomination called Community of Christ. And he was committed to being within that system to bring peace and to bring an awareness of the humanity among all of the people, even though there he was in the midst of the war. So this song, you will see, it's a video made by Community of Christ when they included this song in their hymnal. And it includes their friends and members from around the world singing the song with just these three words: peace, salam, and shalom, and some other words in English and Spanish and French. So just one moment. May this song inspire us to keep on doing the work so that we can bring these stories that Kathy has shared with us to more and more people and create an end to war.
Peace, salam, shalom. 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 Peace, salam, shalom.
Lukusi wala
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 Peace, salam, shalom.
We believe in peace.
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 Salam, shalom.
Creemos en la paz. Creemos en la paz. Creemos en la paz. Creemos en la paz. Salam shalom. We will work for peace. 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 Salam shalom. Obramos por la paz. 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 Salam shalom. Nous œuvrons pour la paix. 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 Salam shalom. Vivimos en la paz. 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 Salam shalom. Nous vivons dans la paix. 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 Salam shalom. We can live in peace. 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 Salam shalom. 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 Peace. Salam
Oh my goodness. Wow, Sandy. Sandy, was that done by the Playing for Change people?
No, it was done by a Community of Christ, and they wanted to put that song that we wrote into their hymnal, and they wanted a way to teach people around the world how to sing that song. And so they took the song and videoed all of those beautiful faces and beautiful artists and beautiful jumping kids. I can't love that video any more than I already do. But it is that same principle that we can bring the voices from each place together. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's lovely, and you know, it had the production kind of style of all those Playing for Change things that are just so great. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm going to try and find it and share it. It's just
Please do. Thank you.
So lovely.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you, Emma's Revolution and Sandy O for being with us. Give our greetings and well wishes to Pat, and let's go on to some Q&A. But first, I want to just read a little more out of our upcoming stuff. We got to Danny Searson. After that, December 12th, we have radical feminist activist academician Sophie Lewis. Music by Karen Klein, we believe. She's a poet and dancer. And Sophie Lewis, December 12th. And that's all that's on this this newsletter, but more to come. Keep us posted. We'll keep you posted. If you send us your email address, we'd be glad to add you onto our list. Again, we're having a hybrid approach to this. Some folks are here live, masked when not speaking, and encouraged to be vaccinated. We try to ventilate this room as well as we can, given whatever weather condition it is going. We have the heat on, and we also have the doors open and the fans going. So we're trying to keep us all as safe as we can during this difficult moment. And we hope that eventually you'll be able to, as many of you as can, be here present for upcoming events and concerts and celebrations and activist meetings and all the stuff that goes on in our building at Copley Square. So let me go through the chat and see if there's any questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any specific questions in the chat, so let's go through everybody and see if there's anyone who has their hand up or who wants to make an observation or just say hello. Let's see.
I have a question, Dean, if you need somebody to start things off.
Yes, I don't even know who it is, but
oh, that's me, Sandy. And my question.
Sandy. Oh, go ahead.
And my question to Kathy really is, what keeps you inspired? Because you have put yourself in such intense situations for so long, and you've been willing to be that courageous person to bring the news back to the rest of us. What keeps you inspired?
I was once asked that question when I was in the church of a very dear friend and mentor, Neville Watson, in Perth, Australia. And I think I started trying to talk about how, as a child, I'd been so impressed by nuns who never made acquiring personal wealth a priority. And Neville interrupted. And he said, well, I reckon I've known you long enough to know that that's not really what inspires you. You fall in love. That's what happens with you. You fall in love all the time. But I think that's maybe somehow I've been extremely fortunate to meet some of the most lovable, kindly, hospitable people in the world. And that has often happened in war zones and in prisons, but you can't walk away or look away and still be responsible to that love that's been shown. And people have been extraordinarily kind to me, in spite of the fact that I come from the country that's been just bludgeoning them through our wars that we don't even recognize necessarily are going on. So I guess the other thing is, well, it's not very, what would I say, inspirational in some ways, but in Animal Farm, George Orwell creates the horse Boxer, and Boxer just says, I'll work harder, I'll work harder. So there's some of Boxer in me, and I don't like to think how Boxer ended up. But just this idea that we can't let these militarists get the upper hand. We have to keep working. And I'm also conscious that humanity has made sometimes some extraordinary gains. We don't poison ourselves with tobacco smoke in many places in the world the way we used to. Slavery is by no means eliminated, but the idea of selling people so blatantly in marketplaces and the cruelty that has come with that, it's not eliminated, but I think that there is a recognition of wrongfulness and a desire often for revolutions. The union movement, Sacco and Vanzetti, there are ways in which people have managed to assert demands, and it's we are many, they are few. The Occupy movement did help us see that it's just that 1% that keeps manipulating us toward war and greed. And also, I do mean this, music and art and stories, and I'm someone who really, really appreciates stories. They've helped to shape me in many, many ways. But I love it when music tells the story.
Thank you so much. All of that is, just hearing the review of the things that we have achieved, these things that, can seem small from the outside, but are huge nonetheless. I really appreciate hearing that. And I've been lucky enough to, I know this isn't a conversation, but I'll just say it anyway. I've been lucky enough to experience that love from people for whom I represent the enemy, or could represent the enemy, going to Palestine and being a Jewish American. So I so appreciate your reminders on all of those fronts, and send you so much love. Thank you for answering that.
Thank you.
And a quick question from me, Kathy. What is the future, and what is your prognosis and your hope for women in Afghanistan now that this has happened?
Well, Dean, I've been immersed in correspondence from people in Afghanistan who worked hard as young people to try to advance ideals. The young women never had it easy. They were always struggling against patriarchy and exclusion and terrible inequalities. But now there's a sense of fear and danger, and particularly amongst the Hazara minority. So I would say that the best hope for many of the young people I know right now is for them to have a buddy. I seriously mean a buddy in a safe place who can help them through this time. And there are many ways to be of help. If some of our young friends do speak and write in English, and just correspondence means a great deal to them. Some would, if they get out of Afghanistan, for instance, if they make it to Pakistan, they become refugees, and they could possibly, over a period of 3 years, qualify for a visa to another country like the United States or Canada. But to do that, they really need assistance, filling out these very complicated forms, being able to demonstrate that there is a community that would welcome them. So if anybody knows of someone, or if you yourself would want to become a buddy to a young woman or a young man, either in Afghanistan or Pakistan, or now one friend has just landed in Iran, I would be more than happy to bring you into a very sturdy team that's working hard. And there are many different groups that are working to do this, but the group that I've been working with are people who knew the Afghan peace volunteers, or our permaculture designers who had worked with some of the people that were their mentors. And it's a very international group and a diverse group. We had a meeting last week, and people were part of it from Australia, from Canada, from the UK, from Portugal, from different parts of the United States. So it's worthwhile work. And right now it's quite difficult.
Thanks.
Dean, could I say one other thing? And that is, I think it's really crucial that we press to unfreeze Afghanistan, to unfreeze the assets, because the teachers and the healthcare workers, many of whom are women, can't get paid. The economy is in a near collapse. And this is an economic warfare. And I think we saw how the United States punished Vietnam after the Vietnam War by freezing assets and causing economic havoc. And we saw what happened with Iraq from 1991 all the way to 2003 with the economic sanctions. And we see what's being done to Iran. So I think that we must really press elected representatives to push the United States to unfreeze Afghanistan's assets. We have no right to withhold their funding.
We will take up, follow up on both of those suggestions, Kathy, here at Community Church. Anybody wants to join me on that, we'll look into it together as a church. We have a hand up from a gentleman, I believe, named Owner. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Phil. I don't know why it didn't come up in the thing. I guess I'm not signed up right. Kathy, since the United States has been driven out of Afghanistan, notwithstanding the reputation of the Taliban for violation of rights and misogyny and all that, and yet now I see the United States has been apparently supporting the Mujahideen and perhaps even ISIS to try to overthrow the Taliban. So my question really is, from your knowledge of the country there, how do you see the Taliban going forward? Do you think that they have, as they say, changed, that they really are trying to do something good in the country? And do you see that as being legitimate, or how do you see that playing out? And do you think there is any hope for a kind of stability in Afghanistan with whatever group or is in charge and running the country? That's just kind of my general question. Particularly, how do you think we ought to regard and work with the Taliban at this time?
Thank you, Joe. The rate of poverty has gone up from 57% of the people being impoverished to now 91%. And the majority of the people are living on less than $2 a day. So they also have a new wave of COVID going across the country and a terrible condition of drought afflicting 24 of the 34 provinces. So the Taliban will be ruling over people who are hungry, cold, desperate. There are numerous people who've already been displaced by the war. And of course, there will be many who are resentful of the Taliban. It should be mentioned, I think, that there's quite a divide between urban and rural Afghanistan. In some of the rural areas, the codes of the Taliban, and this has been told to me by grandmothers, they said, these practices existed that confined us to being unable to leave our homes or unable to go to work or unable to get an education. These practices existed before the Taliban even existed. And so in some of the rural areas of Afghanistan, the Taliban discrimination against women isn't felt in the same way that it's experienced in the urban areas where women were beginning to get some rights and some measures of, I wouldn't say equality, but approaching being able to leave the homes, to go to school, to get jobs. some of the people in the rural areas were very, very angry at the corruption in the Taliban government under Ashraf Ghani and before him under Karzai. The corruption was such that if you wanted to get anything done, you had to pay a bribe. And so in some areas, the Afghan Analysts organization would go into kind of sort of undercover. They'd go and live in a rural area. And what they were finding is that people felt that the Taliban courts that were settling issues of land disputes or property disputes were actually more predictable and reliable and fair than the centralized government, which was so far away and which often said, yeah, we'll settle that dispute, but you'll have to come up with some money. So it could be in some areas that people would be so relieved that they don't have war going on in their neighborhoods, in their villages, and perhaps not as horrified by Taliban practices, but people are hungry and they're cold and the livelihoods are very, very threatened. There's also the matter of the fact, Afghanistan is, you could say, a failed narco state. And whoever is controlling the opium production is going to have quite a lot of the revenue that does exist coming into their coffers. And the Taliban can also control people going across borders and charge a toll on every single truck, on every single vehicle. So when the United States refuses to free up assets, it's not necessarily going to harm the Taliban authorities. They'll still have access to some funds, but it will hurt the poorest of the poor and the majority of the country, who are women and children. Should the United States recognize the Taliban? I would like to see an escrow account, which the United Nations now has set up, being administered through groups like UNICEF, which is now paying for schools to open up. I'd like to see the United Nations have that kind of an escrow account and a sort of an alternative way to funnel desperately needed funds into the places where those funds are most desperately needed. Do the Taliban have an ability to govern a country? Many of the fighters are youngsters who grew up on farms. They never had a chance to become literate. They know a lot about carrying guns and using guns, but not necessarily, they're not necessarily equipped to be technocrats and run a country. So I'm not sure how those kinds of problems will be solved. Will the Taliban eventually turn to some of the people who are, cowering in their own homes and afraid to go out on the streets with good reason and say, look, we really need you, let's bargain, because if you don't go back to work, we don't know how to make this country work.
I want to share that Pat Westwater-Jong, hi Pat, sent a little note in the chat. Do you have time to send these suggestions to us in a way that we can send on? Maybe with a link to her talk, and Q&A might include peace, shalom, salam, shalom song that Sandy shared. And yes, absolutely, we will do that, and we will put together all those links for everyone to share. Absolutely. Let's see. Are there any more hands up or questions? Let me see if I can find. Anybody else here?
Pat had her hand up.
Who had their hand up?
Pat.
Oh, Pat, go ahead, Pat. Unmute and join us.
Okay, thanks, Dean. What a fabulous breaking story. And Kathy ended with the information about China, which we can sort of see in the news on the horizon, the next war. And so many of us worked so hard to stop the United States from attacking Iraq and failed, and Afghanistan and failed. And here we are with a growing movement. So many more people are joining the movement for justice for Palestinians as that increases. And I remember talking with Granny D about how do you get more people involved? How do you get more people involved? Any suggestions on how we might, and this is actually something our local group has been talking about. Once we get them signed up for a list, then how do we get them to make a phone call? How do we get them to actually sign the petition we send them? So suggestions? Thanks.
Well, I think one of the ways to stop a next war is to keep telling the truth about the wars that we are waging presently or that we've most recently waged. So I find that veterans are extremely important, that their truths can sometimes be persuasive in ways that others just don't seem to have the same kind of street cred. So I certainly think supporting Veterans for Peace. Now that tends to be an older group, but there are younger groups of veterans like the About Face group. And also I think, to whatever extent we can assure whistleblowers that their truths will be heard. Now, I think the government has tried very hard to deter anybody by ganging up on whistleblowers, charging them with so many felonies that they could spend 50 years in prison if they don't plead guilty, and then putting them in extremely difficult penitentiary settings. But to whatever extent we can encourage truth telling about our wars, I think that's extremely important. It seems like it ought to stand to reason that if we don't work with China with regard to pandemics and climate catastrophe, we can't survive these very, very alarming times. And so I think pressing to work with China, not to form greater enmity and isolation, should just be a sensible talking point that every group would make. And it seems to me that the value of not turning away from the Ahmadi family is that they got it so wrong. And it's so emblematic of how wrong this artificial intelligence and drone warfare can be and has been. And so it's my hope that people can go to their elected representatives and say, look, don't turn away from this family. The United States never even contacted them until late October. The family was attacked by the drone on August 29th. They heard nothing from the United States, nothing about compensation, nothing about getting family members to safety, nothing. And then finally, there was enough media attention from major media that I think they sort of had to contact the family and start negotiating. That's still going on. And then, of course, they came out last week. The Pentagon came out with this statement that, well, we didn't do anything wrong. So I think it's important to take those photos of the Ahmadi family and go to the bases where drones are still being operated, where people are being trained to use drones, and then also go to elected representatives in Boston, go to Raytheon, and keep trying to say this is not something we can accept. And we see how this points to what can happen in the future when we arrogantly tell ourselves that we can use this artificial intelligence and get the better of other people. So I put in the chat bankillerdrones.org. That's a group that's working very hard to get an international treaty prohibiting weaponized drones, like the international treaty that now exists to prohibit nuclear weapons. And I hope people will link up with their local groups, those environmental groups, veterans groups, and groups wanting to ban drone warfare, and we can, I hope, make a push.
All right. I would like to see if there's anyone in the audience, in the room here, that would like to ask a question or make a comment.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead. Maybe you need to come close to the microphone and tell us who you are. I don't believe I've had the pleasure.
Yeah, I'm Joe Cabatas from the Veterans for Peace. And I have a question on a protest. Is there any plan for a large protest against drone warfare, which could attract media attention to our issue, this issue? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joe. You know, there was last week a large protest at Creech Air Force Base. Sorry, that was 2 weeks ago. And there's a meeting this afternoon that will happen to plan both Armistice Day actions and also to look toward November 29th as a possible day. It'll be 3 months after the killing of the Ahmadi family, to have a series of protests across the country that will use the theme, don't turn away. Don't turn away from the photos of those people and from the plight that they've experienced. And so we certainly are dependent on Veterans for Peace for their wisdom and their participation in all of this. Also for New Yorkers, a drone has been installed as an artwork on the High Line plinth. And it's not a weaponized drone, it's a facsimile of a drone, but that gives an excellent opportunity for outreach and education and protest. And people are leafleting at that spot every week.
All right, I'm looking for any other hands that might be up. Let's see.
I noticed that Pat Westwater-Jong has put in the chat that there's already a Boston protest planned for November 29th. A number of area peace groups are planning it. That's very good to know. The Massachusetts Peace Action Campaign and the AFSC campaign against Raytheon have been just stellar in leading the country with their actions in education and outreach.
Yes, that's right. Mass Peace Action, with whom we just did an event 3 weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon. Dorothy, I see your hand up. Unmute thyself. Dorothy Weitzman. There you
Okay,
are.
I think it's gonna, I'm wondering, Kathy, thank you for your talk and your service, things you've done I've known about before, mainly at World Fellowship. I was very happy to have you talk there once. Right now, I'm thinking to ask you, what do you do with the argument that I feel does have some attractiveness to many people, and that is, if we use drones or some new ways of targeting only few people, we are saving many others because we do not have on the ground warfare, the alternatives that we've known that might be more destructive to more land, more destructive to more buildings, hospitals, people.
Right.
So that's my question.
One argument against that usage of drones is that it becomes a recruitment for people who are so angered by the fact that their loved one was simply driving a car, driving home to the family dinner or entering the family home. People are so enraged when these drones attack them for no reason that they become more likely to be part of groups that are going to be antagonistic toward the United States. Even General Stanley McChrystal had once said, basically, we're creating terrorists faster than we can kill them. And Andrew Coburn has written very extensively, maybe most recently in the London Review of Books, about the inherent inability of these drones to see more than a dot or a blur on the screen. and then they have to, engage in conjecture that, well, we think this might be a target because we think this person is of this ethnic background and of this age. And under the Obama administration, they were actually developing weekly lists of people who were targeted for signature strikes. And that was all the information they had. And so the more that there is reliance on artificial intelligence and robots and this kind of delivery system that is more and more removed from human contact, from any kind of human awareness of what's happening on the ground, the more we are moving toward a very, very dangerous future, especially if there's any anticipation of arming the unmanned aircraft with nuclear weapons, with dirty bombs, or with some kind of nuclear delivery system. So I think we have to be in touch with 21st century warfare. And it's very, I would say, alarming to realize what this can lead toward. It is true that you won't have the terrible desecration and scarring of lands that deployments of large militaries create. The United States right now has 800 military bases, and they created 500 bases all told in Afghanistan. So I'm happy to see all of those bases close, but the idea that somehow the United States can get the upper hand by being able to engage in drone attacks is very, very frightening if in fact the US admirals and generals themselves are saying, look, you're going to have to accept that we may have to cross the nuclear threshold, that the only way we can get the better of a near peer like China is to be willing to use a nuclear bomb.
Lynn Siegel, you have your hand up.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead and unmute yourself. Nice to hear from you, Lynn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just question about what you just said, Kathy, and that is, what if we get the high techness enough that we can figure out exactly who is the bad guy? Because I think the inherent problem is that there are no bad guys. There just aren't.
Well, I totally agree with you. I do not at all approve of the idea of looking for a high value target and saying this is the terrorist. I think the greatest terrorists are those who are causing the destruction of our planet. That the greatest terrors we all face are the terrors of what we're doing to our own environment. And I think that the terror that the United States has unleashed by trying to control other people's resources has been enacted with impunity for decades. So I don't think we have any right to say this is a high value target and without any judge or jury or investigation or police work, we're going to assassinate this person, we're going to eliminate this person. I think that's a wrongful way to proceed in the first place. So I don't have any use for the idea of drones selecting targets, even if they did believe that the target was somebody who created a threat to the United States. You don't just assassinate the person.
Owner, go ahead. I still don't have your name right to rename you.
I don't know how to rename myself either. Anyway, Phil Nichols is my name. I want to
Phil?
follow a little bit with a different
It's-
perspective, or a perspective on what's happening in the United States, why there's so much apparent complacency in regard to what we're doing. Back when I was a younger man, in the 60s, we had the draft. And I think the draft is the fact that they could take people and take them off and put them in the middle of a battlefield, created a lot of personal fear and opposition that I think is what motivated the anti-war move at that time. And very wisely, Nixon ended the draft so as to remove that motivation, to distance the war from the people. And now, of course, we have the all volunteer army, which really involves a draft of the poor, people who don't have alternatives. So they volunteer to go off, and so again, once again, that removes the anti-war motivation. Also, I remember during the Iraq War, every night we had, and now we have pictures of 10 more people who were killed in Iraq, and they showed the pictures, and it was really kind of turning the United States against the war. And then when first Bush and then Obama said, okay, we're gonna remove boots from the ground, and we're just gonna do it with drones. So we've lost the sense of any personal, in America, we've lost the sense of any direct personal impact from the war, unless we happen to know somebody who was injured or killed. So I think by removal of this personal impact, it makes it a lot easier for the war makers to go on, and a lot easier for, a lot harder for people to really feel the impact. Like that August 29th thing, I think that affected a lot of people when people said, oh my God, those are all children. So that's just a comment. And I guess my question would be, how can we then re-engage the American people to where they say, yeah, this really is bad and wrong what they're doing in our name?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Phil. I think that the think tanks that the military employs, went right to work after the Vietnam War to overcome the Vietnam syndrome, just as you've laid it out. And then they also had this really awful, sinister plan of marketing wars as humanitarian wars, that somehow we owed it to the women and children to wage war against them. So I think we have to keep trying to tell the truth. Younger generations perhaps are not going to be as easily manipulated by mainstream news. And that I think that every opportunity we get to go into universities, into faith-based communities, into different kinds of organizing efforts like environmental efforts, and say, look, we don't have a chance of solving the problems we want to solve if we don't first dismantle the military, because the military is taking all the resources. And so when we tell people what the truthful consequences of our wars are, and when we listen to refugees who've been displaced by these wars, it may be that we'll be able to push that education and that outreach out further. I think it's a really important time to ask people who have tenured positions in universities to really think about how to tackle the militarism that's become like a dominant religion in the United States, and do the same with the faith-based communities and houses of worship. I'd say the major religion in this country right now is militarism, and other religious activities are almost a smokescreen, but it's the militarism that dominates people's lives in many, many ways, and especially through taking our resources. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of a demonic suction tube, just taking all of our resources so that we can't deal with the problems we face. So it's an issue of constant education, outreach, speaking, acting. Civil disobedience, I believe, is always appropriate when it's challenging laws that protect wrongful murder. And then when there are these moments, like the killing of the Ahmadi family, we have to really stay with that and not turn away.
Oh, well, Kathy, one last check here. I think that people are getting hungry in this auditorium. They have pupusas on their mind. And with that, I just want to...
Dean, could I just give a special greeting to Pat McSweeney? I believe she's with you. I'm almost sure I saw her enter. Pat, are you there?
Let me make her big for you.
I
Come on
just
in here,
wanted to
Pat.
offer a special appreciation to Pat McSweeney because she's been such an accompaniment to so many people in the peace movement, and her very dear friend Megan Rice and Presente has entered into another life. And Pat, just thank you for staying in touch and for being the stalwart you are.
Kathy, your talk was very good, and I'm hoping that it'll be available online so that we could tell our friends to hear you. It was wonderful. And I'm just thinking more of us should go into the Boston Globe and to the TV stations to explain now with people who are not wanting to vote in support of what the American people need. Those same lawmakers are voting in our obscene military budgets. And we should be nudging and insisting that more of our writers, I'm sure there are many reporters and journalists who would be willing. It's the corporations that don't want the real news to get. Thank you, Kathy. It was wonderful to see you. I have two friends with me. We came here thinking we were going to see you. That's how out of touch I am.
Oh, next time.
Okay, good. Okay, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you to our longtime friend Pat McSweeney, who came quite a long way to be here live and got the virtual Kathy, which is not quite the same, but still wonderful. And with that, we have one more question. Dan the Bagel Man is with us.
Question. I just came to the Boston Common when the cops chased me out. And there's cops that blocked all the streets off downtown because people were saying no to people who are racist. People supporting the anti-vax movement. But cops are in the problem.
We can't hear her.
Start again, please.
We have a problem today in Boston. There's a rally for a group that organized against tyranny.
Closer.
They're called Super Happy Fun America. And they're having a rally in the Commons today. There are people who started they had the Straight Pride rally.
They're white.
They went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
Nationalist movement, yeah.
And a lot of anti-vaxxers. So they're having a rally. So counter-protesters by about thousands, and about 50 of them. But the cops support them. The problem is Boston police have a new mayor coming in, Wu, who wants to defund the police. And the cops don't like that. They don't like her. They're spreading out all over stories about her. And so there's a fight going on. So they have all extra cops, all the streets are blocked off. I drove into the Commons at one spot. The cop said I couldn't go to the normal spot. I get to the Commons, and the cop comes up to me within 10 minutes and you can't park here. I said, I'm on the road. Nope. So I'm going up to Park Street. I drove to Park Street. Another cop said, you can't park here. You know, I park here every day feeding the homeless. And meanwhile, the hot dog vendors allowed there because the cops know who I am. Somebody doesn't believe in right-wing fascism. A lot of cops are fascists, and that's the problem. So they don't want the media. They wouldn't let the media in there. I called Channel 4 and 5 both so they couldn't get the trucks in there. But they at least are willing to listen to me, and they like what I said. They agree with me that the police, a lot of them are the problem. They're a lot of them connected. During the 50s, the KKK were cops. A lot of them, even before that. History of the KKK being police departments people. So it's now not the KKK, it's Super Happy for America. Sampson, ex-military, one of the people there. There's a lot of corruption in the whole mentality of it all. So Boston today is being taken over by the police. They said they're there to make peace. How can you make peace with men with guns? Black ops. A Coffee Square, a bunch of cops here take over the park. They're so far away. Because they want to show they're needed. We need more money for cops. More money to spend on police. They're needed for what? The guns people said, I got them to remove the police vehicle at Park Street. They used to have a police van empty. Why was it there? Show the city, the tourists that our cops are doing the job. Garbage. Anyways, I have to go in my car before the cops told me I'm in the park illegally. I park every day, but and I'm scared in my car. So
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for the work you do,
all right,
feeding
guys.
homeless day after day. Yeah, yeah. I want to let everybody know that that all of the chat will be copied and pasted into the YouTube presentation, which you can find on Community Church of Boston Official, which is our YouTube channel. I want to thank everybody who has joined us here, and close by saying there must be a time, there must be a place when everyone will finally come together. If there is a God with a human face, I'm sure he'd want us all to come together and get beyond these bolted doors and get beyond these awful bloody wars, get beyond this way of settling scores, because the score is never even. If I had the words, then I'd make the case that everyone has got to come together. If I had the hounds, I'd call off the chase and everyone could finally come together. We'd get beyond who's right and wrong. We'd get beyond the need to look so strong and just get on with simply getting along, because that's a thing we can all believe in. Because that's enough of the bitter tears. That's enough of talking to our mirrors. And that's enough of separate hemispheres. That's enough, oh, that's enough. We really gotta come together. Really gotta come together. We really gotta come together. Those are the words of Susan Werner. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Keep in touch, everybody. Do good work. Peace, salam, shalom is what I say. We love you all. We have a board meeting on Tuesday night. If there's any non-board members who want to join us, be in touch. Dean@deanstevens.com is my email address, and I can send you the link. And let's all of us who are here thank Luis Guzman for the pupusas we have today and the coffee. And then we will go out into the beautiful day that is crisply ours today, and say goodbye to everybody who has joined us. Again, everybody go like this for Kathy Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And for Emma's Revolution. This has been a beautiful morning, and thank you all. From Community Church of Boston, we